So many of you may remember I gave a short talk, maybe like, was it 6 months ago now, Mauricio?
I think so.
About my home lab. So I'm going to kind of continue that and kind of show how it's developed over the past 6 months. Hasn't developed as much as I would like to, but hopefully you'll find it interesting. So my home lab away from home, update to my personal infrastructure. Jeff Moore, one and only, legend. So you leave right now after this slide. 2 things to know. I moved away from my home lab to hosted compute, and I automated a bunch of things. So yeah. So is this really a home lab talk? No. But yes. But no. But yeah. But really, what is a home lab? Some say a home lab, or home is where the heart is. I say home is where the data is. Wise quote by me just now. But in all seriousness, there were some reasons why I wanted to change. So I had a home lab. It was under a bed. I think, is the next slide? Nope, that's buzzwords. So I had a home lab. It was under a bed. I was using vanilla KVM, and I was creating VMs that way. But there were some times where I had to configure the entire system by myself since I was using CentOS 7, KVM, and I think that's about it. So I had to configure everything else for the automation part. And when there were power failures, those power failures were very painful because they took several hours of dev work, not several hours of time, but just dev time concentrated to bring the system back up to the correct place so it can function, because I did not have a stable enough platform that was resilient. So that kind of went into infrastructure, and I guess that covered maintainability too. You don't want something where you have to spend like 5 hours a week maintaining. Ideally you have something that works and that you can use to do great things on. So those are kind of the primary reasons for my change. But I do still have that server. It's not under my bed. I have to put it back together, but it's still there. And I built another one. Went from 12 cores, 288 gigs of RAM to 12 cores, or I upgraded from 12 cores, 288 gigs of RAM to 12 cores, 32 gigs of RAM. Story for another time, but it is an upgrade. So yeah, it wouldn't be one of my talks without a bunch of buzzwords. I'm not going to go over all of these, but here are all the buzzwords that we can cover today. It's kind of going to be a loose format. I'm going to tell you the before, the after of my architecture, and kind of where the strengths and weaknesses are with each of those architectures. And then we can kind of get into whatever you guys want to think about. So I'm going to leave this up here for maybe like 15 seconds, pause, and you can kind of see which direction you want to go in for when we get to that part of the talk. Aye. Free IPA is in free beer. It kind of does. I did one of these fancy word cloud generators because I thought it'd be fancy. I think it worked out, but has its limitations. Cool. So this is my 12-core, 288 gig server, Prometheus. Dylan named it. Shortly after he named it, I figured out, I learned about the metric store thing, Prometheus, the really cool one that's buzzword. And then I wanted to rename it, but I never got the heart to. So it's Prometheus. And it is going back under my bed soon. That's where it belongs. Runs pretty cool. More interesting than the server is the architecture that was around that server before. So this right here, can you see a mouse on the screen? So that's a bed. And then this is the server. It couldn't actually be under the bed and be visual, but hopefully I captured that. Yes, it's embedded. It's an embedded server. I really like that one.
I'm a dad, I can do it.
So I had a server that was under my bed. I didn't control the network, and on that server I had a bunch of VMs that really didn't do anything. But ignoring the fact that they didn't do anything, how I connected to that was I had that server connect to a VPN in the cloud. Or I had several clouds at the time. And so DigitalOcean has their computer called Droplets, so water drops. That hosted OpenVPN. Sometimes I had Kubernetes there when I needed to burst capacity and host some things. I think I did it over the summer of 2019. Google Cloud Platform, I had a container registry there. And sometimes I use Kubernetes engine because it's cheap when you use preemptible VMs. Still is cheap. It's amazing. It's probably the best Kubernetes offering out there. And then I had some AWS stuff for some reason. I keep getting bills for that, even though I don't have any resources. I think it's like 2 cents a month, so I don't really care about it. But I should probably figure that out eventually. But what I really didn't like about this architecture is everything was distributed, but I wasn't really getting the value I wanted. I kind of wanted, at the time, I had a vision where I would kind of dive in headfirst into a cloud, learn about that cloud, and I'd use that to kind of further my career and learn about all the cloud things. It's very beneficial to know something a lot about at least one cloud. AWS is probably the preferable one, but I liked Google at the time. So I had most of my resources there, but DigitalOcean was a simple to use interface, so I kind of went with that. Regardless of whether I was using those resources in the cloud, though, I was still getting billed for them. So there are a lot of months where I had maybe, well, I'm not going to share numbers, but I had a lot of compute that was allocated but not used. And that really sucked because I had a computer under my bed that I could use for compute if I needed to, or I could just use the stuff that I had, but I didn't really spend the time investing in all the other things that come around or come with being on the cloud, especially automation. That's super important to be efficient. And adding new things cost a lot of time because of those two other reasons. So, but on the other hand, when you're in the cloud, you can scale infinitely if your wallet can scale infinitely. I had more RAM than I could ever use on-prem, and there's nothing that can beat the per dollar cost of compute that I can get on-prem, assuming that I'm paying my own power bill. I think the server costs probably today like $1,200, if that. So pretty good value if you know where to find the parts. And I could use it to further my knowledge of KVM. That's super important to me. I think virtualization is equally important as containerization, so I use that as an opportunity to kind of learn KVM, so I could learn Linux, so I could learn KVM, and kind of get into that positive feedback loop. So it's not like it was a one-sided thing. I think the flaws outweighed the benefits, so I decided that I had to do something else. So I did. Once again, this is my architecture. And now this is what I use. So a coworker of mine told me a few months ago that he was standing up a colo really far, well, I think it's in Lenore or Lennar. I've never been there. I've only been there once. I drove out there with him, and we installed it. And he was going to install VMware on it. So what that bought me was the ability to consolidate all of my infrastructure into one platform, or at least 90% of it. And I wouldn't have to worry about maintainability, stability, and I could do the precious dev work that I really was hungering for. The architecture probably makes more sense to go into the benefits and flaws before I go into the actual architecture, so I'm going to do that. So once again, it's more expensive if I don't use it, so I'm making sure that I use it. I made a heavy push to put the services on there that I needed early. Rather than perfecting them, I decided to go for like a really cheap solution. So for Kubernetes and Elastic, I have single node clusters, bad practice, but if you don't have a Kubernetes API, if you don't have an Elastic stack where you can store data, it's useless. So I went ahead and made that push so I could get the services I needed up there first, and then I'm going to iterate on those. VMware is hard, but it has a nice API, probably similar quality to Kubernetes, and they're making a big, VMware as a company are making a good Kubernetes push. So that's really impressive for my automation efforts. I believe so. And there's some issues that we need to work past, but the issues are so few and far between and so easily avoided that I'm not even really sure if they're issues or inconveniences at this point. But the benefits, on the other hand, no maintenance, high reliability, everything just works because you know VMware, and I get my precious dev time. So explaining my architecture, and the reason why this architecture is a little bit more, it may seem a little bit more fully fleshed out, and that's because it is. Since I've had this ability to develop on, I've been able to throw up more servers. My ideal architecture is better than what we have at work, quote. So I can use the lessons I learned from work to kind of build my perfect infrastructure. And so that's kind of what I've done here. So at work, we use Kubernetes, albeit a flavor OpenShift, Elasticstack, IDM, FreeIPA is the open source version. VPN, I don't really touch. A little bit of Terraform. We have DNS. But I was able to use FreeIPA for identity management. So instead of having to configure keys for 20 different servers, I can use FreeIPA and everything can authenticate using Kerberos tickets and all that goodness. So I only have to have one login per user, and I can easily scale out users as I need to, including service accounts, which are super important. Elasticstack stores my logs, as I mentioned, and I have other VMs for other services. like Factorio, which I'm going to stand up in a few days, probably over the weekend, and then that's where another 300 hours of my life are going to go. Also, it's similar to AD. I think that's the closest comparison.
It's got all that Kerberos, DNS, all that.
I do not use it for DNS. I was recommending.
You don't have to.
Yeah.
But it does have it built in. I've worked with developers that work with FreeIPA. So that's my baby.
It's very nice. I'll admit it's a very smooth experience. The RBAC is pretty sweet. Once I can figure out how to crack the API, that'll be when I get the real value.
They're working on getting it more supported and fleshing out the API as well. They're also, if you've seen Ansible FreeIPA.
I've seen that actually today.
That with Rally and the later Fedoras, that's available. We're working on getting it to do deployment and administration tasks. We're doing a lot of system roles and Ansible roles to help your management, so you don't have to do it by hand.
That's fair. I've also seen it as a container, so that's something I want to play with once my Kubernetes architecture gets a little bit more mature.
Cool. And I'd like to get feedback on how you want to see it leveraged in Kubernetes, because we're trying to find the ways that make sense.
Yeah, it's very heavily. This is probably a conversation for another time, but it's very heavily configuration based. So unless you have like a persistent data store, which it's Kubernetes is, that'll be a tough one. It feels like you would want to do that across Kubernetes clusters too, so you get that kind of. But that's another issue entirely. So I'm not sure if it makes sense for that.
Discussion later.
Yeah, yeah. So I was able to be efficient / lazy. I call it lazy. A coworker corrected me and said that is efficient. So I like to have a heavy focus on automation. So for that, I use Cloudflare. Cloudflare has a free DNS service, and even better than the free DNS service is the fact that I don't have to maintain DNS. That's equally valuable that's more valuable than it being free. And I just use Terraform to provision that. So I get free DNS for my cluster, and I can even scope it down to the set of hosts that the egress is coming from, my public IP address. So I could even secure it that way if I wanted to, but I don't think anybody's going to do DNS lookups on my stuff. And I have some future work. I have a Trello board that's really cool with all of my different sites. That's how I organize it, with different tasks, ranging from infrastructure tasks to automation tasks to bug fixes and stuff like that, similar to Jira. So I can kind of stay organized because I get easily distracted, as you can probably tell by now. As I mentioned, my Kubernetes Elastic architectures aren't that great, and I can probably leverage VMware to get better availability and improve my workflows. Some of my workflows are really good, but the Ansible that I have to initialize servers isn't the best, so I need to work on that, amongst other things. So yeah. Are we done? Word cloud? No, we're not done. What do you want to talk about? So I've done projects using most of these things within the past month. So this is kind of the part where you ask me questions about one of these components and we go into it. Kind of an open, yes.
So I don't want to ask about specific components you labels because I'm a generalist, and I like to be eclectic, pick whatever matches the question. But I am concerned about feature function, and one of the concerns is in the area of security.
Okay.
So I assume if you've got a lot of servers in a home lab, that you want to be able to access them from outside your home lab.
Yes.
And if you want to do that, how you do that securely without everybody in the world also accessing your servers in your home lab is an interesting question. So I assume you have network firewalls and some kind of border security, but then you probably also have server security and application layer security. But initially, I'd like to restrict the question to the border security and how you get in and out of it, because that's always an interesting question to me.
Okay,
getting in and out securely.
That's a great question. Maybe I should have. Now that I think about it, I should have made my word cloud a little bit more generic. Originally, I had this talk of the problems that each of these products solve. So I think that's a great question. And for the mic and for the recording, the question was how I configure border security and how I secure the servers within that actual site. Correct? So I'm going to go back to my diagram here. So I use, at the edge, VMware is very complicated, but I have it set up where I can forward individual ports on my public IP address to certain VMs on the back end. So I forward a VPN port to a pfSense host who gates all incoming traffic, and that's how I secure it at the edge, kind of. And pfSense has its own authentication realm outside of the Kerberos. So you have to have separate credentials to log into that, and then to actually get onto the network, you have to have a user provision with FreeIPA, the identity management system. Does that answer your question?
No, it's a start, but I don't know what you do inside your servers, whether you're just serving applications or whether you're serving pages or what you're serving to the outside, or whether you do real work and like you've got a DevOps system where you beam into it and run jobs on it. But there may be all different layers or requirements for getting into your home lab from outside. And so opening up ports is fine if you're serving a particular piece of content on a port. And then I say it's fine, but you still need a way for somebody in the outside world to land on that unless they're coming in through a VPN. Okay, if they come into a VPN, well, you're saying, I'm just going to expose my lab as a lab to somebody who has strong credentials to get in. And that may be the solution for everybody, but it isn't the solution for somebody who'd like their home lab to look like a cloud to the outside world. You need to do more work than just that. So the question is, do you do any of that, i.e. exposing more of your home lab to the outside world like it's part of the real internet, or do you just beam into it and work from the inside?
Great question. So when it comes to configuring my services, in the example of Victoria, which I'm going to stand up this weekend, I keep telling myself I'm going to do that, even though it's bad for me. So I provision a service, or I provision the server. I open up the single port on the firewall, and then I forward that port to I'm not sure what the VMware term is, but I basically port forward it to the VMware layer. So that port is then mapped to that VM. So all traffic that comes in on that port, on that IP address, directly goes to the VM.
I think what he's asking is, are you hosting anything besides for the VPN connection to the internet?
Like websites or
right,
the chat server.
Not right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. He just has the VPN port open.
So he's even looking less like a lab and just opening a particular service for him is like an API that he's using.
Not necessarily. You don't normally open a lab up to the internet.
Yeah, it'd be more like a corporate network.
Yeah, you open up services on a corporate network, and that's
in your corporate network, and then you can freely go around.
Exactly. Once you're inside, you can do whatever
Right,
you need to do.
that's basically what he's doing. He's going through the VPN into his internal lab, and then through the VPN.
It certainly solves a lot of problems as long as you can work in that model and you don't have to serve clientele on the outside world who aren't going to set up strong credentials and go into your VPN and work inside your, they're not a corporate citizen of you, they're a client. Then you've got other problems.
Well, you got a problem with the client itself then. If you cannot secure your lab from bad actors one way or the other, whether they're the clients or someone from the outside.
No, I didn't mean to imply or say you can't. No, I meant that a real cloud has to be able to stand up public available internet resources, URLs, URI.
I do it via services, not via VMs.
And in doing that, there's a lot of security work, both preventing people from getting in and doing bad things and causing clients problems, and also how do people find you and access those things,
Yeah, but it's a home lab, not a business. So
Homelabs could be sophisticated.
true, but he's not serving it to other people.
To make this stuff perfectly available, in the future, I'm going to have an IPv6 CIDR block, so every service will get its own IP address that then maps to the port, and then I have the DNS automation in place.
I'm sure that will solve every problem for all the IPv6 people in the room.
It probably won't. I'm probably going to have to do some natting, but I'm kicking that can down the road, trying to make sure that I can get services up quickly.
Is purpose just to able to access your lab securely?
No. My purpose, my lab is more of a business than a lab. So it isn't. I didn't mean to say it that way, but I'm just picking up on the comment that the gentleman in the back made, that when you set up a business, that you may have people that need to access it that don't have a sophistication in setting up VPN access into your service. You need to access it like it's part of the internet, and in doing that, you need to. So I'm seeing a lot of head shaking. I don't know what your comment is and why you're disagreeing with me, but you don't think people need to access resources on the internet?
It depends on your purpose for serving and your purpose in consuming. And in your model, even if you did work with clients, you would require them to have a VPN connection.
Yeah, if I were to have clients, which I doubt I will, I'd expose services, not like access to the network, because I don't want to deal with that.
You basically have a playground that you can work within,
Yeah.
and not see it outside.
Yes.
It's just so you can connect things up, see how they work.
Yeah.
It's a safe space.
Yeah.
So everything's in your VPN.
Well, technically everything is on my Angry Bees Cloud tenant network, and then I just expose the VPN as if it was another service in that VPN.
Is DNS exposed separately, or is that?
So DNS, it's kind of a weird, so it's entirely in Cloudflare, and ideally I have a DNS cache server that just caches the requests and serves them internally so that it reduces load on Cloudflare. But I could serve DNS entirely from Cloudflare. I have automation in place to do that if you're interested in seeing that. It's pretty cool stuff. Because I was too lazy. Like that's, you know how people say you should, as a business, you should only focus on your core business and buy everything else? Because it's not your core business. That's kind of the model I took with this. So DNS is not my core business, and I doubt it will ever be my core business, so to speak. So I went with Cloudflare after recommendations from my coworkers.
Now, are you doing updates? Is IK doing any DNS tracking at all, or is it installed without it completely?
I didn't figure out how to install it without DNS, but I'm not using it for DNS.
Okay, so you can install it without setting up DNS, and you can tell it not to.
Okay.
I found a lot of times, though, it's better if we have it just to do the automated updates. You can do the dry runs, and it'll send all the DNS records to whoever you want it to work with, because we've been trying to make it work better with the DNS providers, because they're a little bit more nuanced on some of the specialness for the different regions. So I was just curious if you had done it completely without, or whether you're tracking a little bit. And it sounds like you're tracking a little bit. It's just not the main provider.
I'm not using it as a DNS source at all.
Okay.
I was recommended against doing that because.
But it knows who its clients are.
Yeah, it knows who its clients are.
Yeah.
And I think it points to the same DNS servers that the other hosts do.
It does. Yeah.
So.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So what do you guys want to see? I have a word cloud. We talked a little bit about identity management. What else do you guys want to see? Elastic. Okay, let's look at Elastic. So I believe I'm connected to my, I'm not connected to my VPN. So let's see, what is the IP address here? Don't judge me for my lack of user management. I was fighting until like midnight getting this thing stood up for this demo. Elastic is almost as hard as Kubernetes to get started because it has so many components.
So you're on your VPN right now?
Yes.
Are you using Xpine?
Yes, I have a basic license because I am cheap.
I'm with you.
All right, so it is 7.6. I think 7.6 dropped, what was it, 2 days ago now? Something like that. So I stood that up. Single node Kibana and Elastic are running on the same server, but there's a really cool thing called Elastic Cloud on Kubernetes. So before I ventured down putting Kibana on the Elastic node, I ventured down putting it on Kubernetes, and it didn't work because of a bug that was discovered like 24 hours ago now. So I had to install it locally or downgrade the version of Kibana. I just decided to install it locally. But in the future, Kibana will be on Kubernetes. But I just use it as a metrics and a log store. I don't have any special indices set up yet for actual use cases, but I'm thinking about diving into some of the public data sets, working to transform them using Logstash, and then seeing what kind of transformations I can make. What's really cool with the basic license, I think I can find it here. Where is it? Machine learning. So there's a new feature that came out, I think in 7.6, where once this loads, until then I'll keep stalling. Unfortunately. Fun fact, you can't access 1194/UDP on the NCSU guest network. So got to take other methods of getting in from my phone. But you can upload a file and it can try to classify your data just with the basic license, which is really cool. So that's something I want to play with eventually. But I basically just have a single node Elastic cluster. I have a little bit of data in here from metric beat. I think the metrics are more important to me today than the logs. Logs are a little bit heavier than metrics. Metrics have a well-defined hierarchy of metric sets and stuff like that. Logs are a little, unless you have, what do you call them, inputs, very good inputs, then your logs are likely not going to be what you need out of the box. So I use it for metrics. Right now, the only thing that's hooked up is a single node Kubernetes cluster, and I'm just getting various metrics about that.
So Kibana looks like something that you could use to quickly and efficiently crunch a lot of data and see a lot of interesting readings from that. And so right now you're just using it for logging things like CPU and memory usage?
Yes. So Elastic as a company has a very sophisticated architecture of what they call beats: packet beat, metric beat, file beat, audit beat, journal beat. What am I missing? I'm missing something. I don't know. But they have a bunch of beats. Metric beats for metrics, file beats for files. Packet beat is for tracking network states. So one of the use cases that came up recently at work was, did I say heartbeat? Well, I'm going to talk about Heartbeat. Heartbeat can do pings between nodes. It can test TCP, ICMP, and I think there's something else it can test. But they basically all have their functions. And once you send that data into Elastic, you can then do some powerful data transformations on it.
So it can work pretty well as kind of an all-encompassing monitoring platform for a...
Yes, and more. But you really have to put in a lot of work to understand how Elastic does its thing so you can transform the data in the correct way. Otherwise, you're not going to get the stuff you want. As a little bit of a learning curve. And by a little bit, I mean a lot of it.
Like, well,
I think so. Yeah. I think Elastic gives you more flexibility at the cost of usability. I think that's their play. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone. Yeah. But Elastic is a great product. If you have some people who really know their stuff, you can do some very powerful stuff with your data use cases. Mostly, probably better for like custom data, transforming that. But it's document based instead of table based. But your documents have, each field has a type, and then you send documents with a bunch of fields, and then you can do aggregations on those documents to get meaningful data out of. So in the case of this field, which I'm going to make a little bit bigger, I could filter on all hosts that are CentOS for an aggregation or something. The average CPU usage of all hosts that are CentOS. That query by nature doesn't make sense why would you want to query on an OS? But you have the power to kind of make that transformation, and that's where the real value is. Yeah. Back to the word cloud.
So Kibana is part of Elastic.
It is part of the Elastic Stack. Elastic Stack is Beats, Kibana, Elasticsearch, APM, Seam, and some other stuff, but mostly Elasticsearch, Kibana, Logstash, and Beats. I'd recommend giving it a try. Even at the basic license, you get a lot of features. And as you can see from this, so where is it? Metric Beat gives you metric sets and modules. So system module has different metric sets. There's Kubernetes module, there's Elasticsearch module, there's all these cool modules that you can use. KVM module, that's your cup of tea. So you get a lot of powerful data out of the box, and it's very easily extendable if you know how to work with Golang or whatever other SDKs they have for that. So back to the word cloud. What else?
So I have a question.
Yes.
So you said the hardware you had actually is more than sufficient for all what you need.
Yes.
So have you thought about just the money you're spending on all these cloud services, is saving that money buying UPS?
No. But I appreciate, I like the guarantees of resiliency. At the end of the day, whether I have a UPS or not, I'm still going to have one box, one outlet at an apartment.
I mean, clearly there's advantages in doing it in the cloud.
Yeah.
For sure, but if you're just trying to save some money.
I'm not spending too much. I think the real value I get from being in the cloud is technically I have more modern resources. I'm never going to use 288 gigs of RAM, but I am going to use more than 12 cores at a given time. So if I can get like 64.
So I have sort of looked at this too.
Yeah.
Of trying to do something like this, and it always seems to me that what really turns out to be too expensive in the cloud is storage.
Yeah.
And I can buy storage locally so much cheaper than I can buy storage in the cloud. I mean, I like having it in the cloud. That's cool, but you pay through the nose for it.
I agree. So when I say Angry Bees Cloud in the diagram back here, it is kind of like a cloud, but it's kind of not. That's just kind of a joke between me and the coworker. But really, it's just a VMware instance at a colo. So I'm basically just running on a virtualization platform.
That's my second question. What version of VMware are you using? Is that ESX or are you?
That's a great question. How would I find that?
So I mean, are you running vCenter?
It says vSphere.
Yeah, I see vSphere here.
There should be a help or
about.
Help, yeah. Try to drop down beside your name with a question mark.
Yeah.
Beside your question mark. Yeah. About.
Yeah.
There we go.
So you're running 6 7. So did you have to buy that or?
I think he had licenses left over from something or another.
Oh, okay.
so you've got a little friend.
By I think it's probably like $200, and then you get
Okay.
lab licenses. I think just the base hypervisor though is free to use.
Yeah.
Is that?
You know, and non-business use, and there's nothing you have to do to use it.
So it's been a pretty stable platform so far.
Oh yeah.
But I am probably going to end up putting a slightly more powerful server under my bed. I recently built out a gaming server, which is more like a workstation that dual boots and plays games. I haven't gotten to the server part, but I'm working on it.
Is number right there?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Just basically, Jeff, what you did by going to the cloud was outsource the system administration.
Exactly, and that's far more valuable than what I'm paying per month. Yeah, his platform, as much as I hate to say it, his platform is going to be better than mine because that's what he does. He's on the infrastructure side. He works with Rev all day. He knows his stuff with VMware, so he's going to have a better architected system than I ever could come up with unless I spent significant effort. So I'd rather just outsource that.
So this was a friend of yours from work.
Yes.
That is coloing one of his boxes.
Several of his boxes.
Several of his boxes at Angry Bees, and okay.
Well, he is Angry Bees.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Back to the word cloud. Come on, some of these I'm itching to talk about. Probably not.
Well, what's some of the workflows that you do with this lab? Like,
Okay, I'm going to tell you about the free IPA enrollment process, which was painful, but once I got it down, it's super fun. Because the host rules for that are a little hard to wrap my head around.
working on it.
Actually, I think I can do this. I guess I'll show it off for those who aren't familiar with Ansible or with free IPA. It is a really nice product. Fun fact, I think over 90% of my infrastructure is CentOS 8. I'm fairly proud of that.
Are you liking it so far?
I like it. I like the module support. Definitely brings it. I definitely like it more than Fedora at this point. Because it's more stable than Fedora, but it's also Fedora basically. You get 2 package managers instead of 1. Well, no you don't. You get DNF and Yum, best of both worlds.
One wraps the other, yeah.
I think I'm admin.
What are the advantages and disadvantages of those 2 package management systems?
Yum has had a weird history. So first, I think Red Hat bought Yellow Dog Linux, and they got Yum with it, and that's Yum 2, I think. And then they switched to DNF for a while, and then they took the lessons from DNF and decided that Yum was better anyway. So
No,
they kind of
basically just used the Yum name again.
Yum wraps
Yeah.
DNF commands.
okay.
So it's basically DNF.
It was to make it an easy transfer from basically 6 and 7 over to 8. And eventually, I'm almost positive Yum's going to disappear, and DNF will be the only thing there.
Was it Yum from SUSE?
I think that's Yas.
No,
Yeah,
it was
after
in
SUSE.
Arcan.
SUSE uses Zipper.
Yeah, Zipper. Debbie uses that.
Yeah, that's why I had the word cloud. 3 slides. But identity management. I have a user. That user can access all things as root, but with a password, and that is because of a policy called, I think it's called allow all, the HVAC rule. There's a really interesting model. You have HVAC, you have RBAC, you have authentication methods, DNS. This thing has a lot of stuff in it.
Even do customized SE Linux confinements too.
Ooh. I haven't gotten that far.
Limit sudo.
That's
regs.
one, after you've mastered the other things, then look at that, but don't do that until you're ready.
But yeah, I basically have a policy that says whoever has this HVAC rule can, well, I guess everybody.
Allow all should be the everybody.
Yeah, so everybody can access any host with the free IPA system. Doesn't mean they can do anything on those hosts, but they can. But now my user has a user group called admins, and admins can, what can admins do? All right, this is a.
You're looking for the role?
Yeah.
The RBAC? That should be, I'm trying to remember where it is right now.
IPA server.
IPA server, I think.
Yeah, it's first one, rollback.
Yeah. Because they're performing the admin role, right?
Yeah. Is this host enrollment? No, it's not host enrollment. But it's a very complicated, it's a very simple system once you get under the hood that allows you to control policy fairly easily. And that's why I use this. Like I said, I don't want to manage 20 of the same user. I'd rather have it managed from a central control plane. Scaling this up to 2, which is my ideal target for this site, is, I'd imagine, is fairly trivial. It's just adding a replica, and yeah, that's that. I don't really have much more to say about it. I like it because it's not interesting.
Central point to do all of your administration, user administration.
Yep, central point. point and do all my user administration.
And if you set up auto membership rules, you can actually have it do some of the group mapping and HVAC rule mapping for you, because you've set up the look for these things, and we'll put these entities into the right rules and groups.
That's fair. How about we talk about Cloudflare? Because I think that's what I'm most proud of out of all of this, which ties into Terraform as well. So let's see if I can log into Cloudflare real quick. Cloudflare. Hopefully I'm still logged in. I am. So I use Cloudflare for all of my DNS records, as I mentioned. As you can tell, I have a lot of DNS records. Some of them aren't the best right now, but they're there. So I'm a fan of automation because efficient, lazy, whatever you want to call it. Adding records is not fun. So that's an IP address. This is how I'd have to enter a record in like bind or something if I wasn't aware of however you could use an API to configure records. Let's call this Jeff. So this is going to be jeff.ab0 because ab0 is a subdomain I use DNS only. I can do that, but that takes, I don't know, 30 seconds or more, and I have to log in. Rather than do that, I have a really cool workflow. How are we on time?
It's not midnight yet.
All right.
I'll jump in front of you.
So instead of that, is that good size?
That's better.
It's not a good sign. There we go. Angry Bees DNS. Gonna change the name so it can be a little bit more cloud agnostic. So my workflow is this. Terraform is awesome, but it takes a lot to get it started. So we have, let's see, my workflow is this. So as we saw me create a record in the GUI before, we created jeff.ab0 with an IP address of 192.168.192.1. Now I want to create jeff1.ab0. ab0. Actually, I can just put it as jeff1. I noticed an error a while back where if I specify the fully qualified domain name, it put too many parts in the Cloudflare. 192.168.192.1, a record 3600. So instead of having to enter something as a in Cloudflare via their GUI, I can add this as a text file. So my workflow is I add it as a text file, I add the record, I have a make file, which is just a Python script that generates more Terraform, and this is the Terraform. Records.auto.tfrs.
And Terraform is what builds for Kubernetes?
No, Terraform is a provisioning platform. I'd say it's Ansible 2.0 in a sense, where in addition to provisioning, it can also manage its state.
It's good for infrastructure. It's good for keeping that state of infrastructure and declaring it, driving toward it.
Yep.
Ansible's got more of a provisioning deal. I think they're kind of complementary. Trying to have either do all of that is full run.
When I'm standing up servers, I use Ansible 100% of the time. When I'm creating the VMs themselves, I feel like it's more of a job for Terraform. Because Terraform interacts with, Terraform is API driven, Ansible is like SSH driven or like host driven in a sense. So I have this file, I don't even need to touch it. What I would do is I do a make records. It shows me the helpful output, git diff. As we can see, it generated a single record within Terraform. Probably don't have enough time to go over all of that, but I'm going to do a git add records.auto.tfrs. Git comment. TriLUG demo. Git push. Ooh, I shouldn't have pushed a master. Forgive me. No, I mean, it's just bad practice, even if I am the only one who contributes to the repo. At least it's not like it's a nighttime push too. Ooh, that's gonna break prod.
At least it's not Friday.
Yeah, at least it's not Friday. And I go to Terraform, which is actually another one of the free things that I use. And with that, it's gonna do everything for me in regards to actually provisioning the records. So now that I have a PR, I go into a workspace and I'm going to, how do I do this? I'm just gonna go ahead and comment this into master. I think it looks good. You wanna have comments for this pull request, or should I just do it live? Hope I don't break prod.
Does it show you the diff?
It is.
Comment.
It's not oh yeah, just added a record. There we go. I must have had some unpushed changes.
What? It looked weird. Where did it go? You had the IP address twice?
No. So records.txt is what actually drives the building. The building is done in a Python script that generates the Terraform.
But even in your text,
you have type as an IP address, and your TTL is the type of record. You've got a problem with your with your thing. Yeah.
There we go.
Ah, yes. Thank you. Thank you. I'm a huge fan of peer review.
Now you gotta add 192.
It's always fun.
Good to have a lot of eyes.
Yep. I think it's worth going into the Python a little bit. We'll take a quick glance at it. Build records.py. It's not good Python. It's just not. Just reads the lines in the file, looks for duplicates, ignores lines, starting with the pound symbol, because I like to have comments in my things. Record it out, basically tells you when records are invalid. So it would have told me that. Or I think it probably did tell me that, but I ignored it. You know, automation. Can't live with it. Can't live without it. And it opens a file and it writes over the records.auto.tfrs. Not sure why I wrote that, but get status. Okay, get comment.
What are your ultimate goals for this setup?
Just take the administration out of DNS. Ideally, I just add a line to that records file and comment or add the line, make the records, comment both. Terraform will take care of the rest, as you'll see.
Okay. So when you're adding clients into your topology up in Cloud Player,
yes.
What's doing the record add? Just that script in Terraform, or?
The record add is manual right now,
Okay.
but since it is architected in such a way that it is mostly automated, all I really need to do is have a service account that has write access to the repository that could then create the record.
So if you export the NS update commands on the dry run, you might be able to automate from that.
Huh. I'll have to look into that.
Yep.
But now that this is pushed, there should be pull request. Yes, yes. That is correct. Looks like there's a helpful Git snippet or a check in Terraform that tells me whether this plan would work. We can ignore the warning for now, but it's telling me that it's going to add a record to Terraform that's going to match jeff1.av0 with this record. So it even runs plans on PRs, which is really nice because I can kind of rely on the safety of I don't really care if the records are good and the records.txt or the records.auto.tfrs. I just care that it's provisioned correctly. So I can use Terraform as kind of like my final yes or no. So now that I have that, I think I can accept my PR now. Merge. Right now, Terraform's manual. I have to manually click approve because I'm not confident enough in my process. With good reason. I've made some mistakes with this so far, but so we should be seeing something here in a second. Okay, it's planning. It already checked the PR, so it should be pretty fast, and I'm only adding one record. See the same thing? It keeps the state in the cloud. You can put secrets up here, so I put secrets for my Cloudflare service account in this, and I don't have to store it in a Git repository at all, which is a huge bonus, so I don't have to worry about credentialing that or rotating it as much, which I still am going to rotate it, which is, I don't have to worry about that for now. So confirm and apply. Looks good to me. And now if we go back to Cloudflare, we're going to see jeff1.av0. Hopefully. Yep, jeff1.av0 is there, and let's see if we can resolve it. Wrong name server. There we go. That's how fast it is to update records. If I want to delete, the workflow is equally fast. I just have to plumb in the work to do that. But it took a little bit longer than 30 seconds, but there's a high potential to automate there. So once I get a little bit more confident with the process, then I have automated DNS records. I could have the same tool that provisions the servers also provision a record for that server based on the host name, and then I can have that automated end-to-end VM building really easily. So, getting kind of late in the night, so word cloud's nice, but we're probably going to have to call it for today. Unless I'm going to open the floor to any other questions about this architecture or anything like that, and then we're going to wrap up for the night. No questions, comments, concerns, criticisms? I'm open to criticisms. Okay, cool. Thank you.